All right, so if you don't know, Democrats on the House Oversight Committee have recently released never before seen emails from Jeffrey Epstein's estate that shed new light on Epstein's relationship with Donald Trump. These include emails that are private exchanges dating from 2011 to 2019, suggesting that Trump had knowledge of Epstein's underage sex trafficking activities, even if he didn't participate, and also reveal Epstein's behind the scenes communications. It's a lot of new correspondence, which is pretty interesting, and I wanted to break down the key exchanges chronologically and then put them into context by cross-referencing what was happening at the time of these emails. And we could do that with news reports and tweets and events. And I also wanted to make this kind of personally for myself because piecing it together would be more helpful for me to understand what's going on here. Yeah, sources are in the description below. Keep in mind, these are all official documents from the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform that officially released all of this. So all the bullshit you hear about Fox News saying it's a hoax and anyone from the Trump administration calling it fake, yeah, they're lying. I wanted to start off with this email in 2011. So in 2011, this was around 2 years after Epstein's first incarceration for soliciting a minor. And we'd see Epstein email his longtime associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, with some type of poetic warning, quote, "I want you to realize that the dog that has embarked is Trump." Epstein wrote this on April 2nd, 2011, and he pointed out that, quote, "Victim spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned, police chief, etc. I'm 75% there." And Ghislaine Maxwell would reply, "I have been thinking about that, ellipsis." Now, to provide a little bit of context, this email came just weeks after a flurry of British press stories in early 2011 exposed Epstein and Maxwell's ties to high-profile figures. Notably, the UK press that spring publicized a photo of Prince Andrew with Epstein's teenage victim, Virginia Roberts Giuffre, and raised questions about Epstein's powerful friends. Epstein's cryptic line about, quote, "the dog that has embarked," alludes to the Sherlock Holmes-esque clue.
Because I remember you spoke of a dog.
Yes, the dog that didn't bark in the night. Well, someone had been into the stable and taken out the horse, and the dog had not barked. So obviously this midnight visitor was someone the dog knew well.
The thing not happening that perhaps should have. Epstein is effectively saying Trump is that silent dog. Apparently, a young woman, one of Epstein's trafficking victims, spent hours with Trump at Epstein's home, yet Trump's name never surfaced in police reports or media about the case. Epstein even references the, quote, "police chief," suggesting astonishment that Palm Beach investigators had not pursued Trump. I don't know what he means by 75%, but he's claiming that he was 75% of the way towards something, convinced of a plan or close to revealing Trump's involvement. I don't know. And Maxwell will reply, "I have been thinking about that." And this implies that she recognized the odd omission of Trump's name in the investigations. However, who was this unnamed victim? Well, the White House claims that this victim was Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's most prominent accusers.
In this email you refer to with the name of a victim that was unredacted now and has since been reported on in this room, so I will go ahead and say it, Virginia Giuffre. And it was CBS's own reporting, Ouija, that recently wrote that Miss Giuffre maintained, and God rest her soul, that she maintained that there was nothing inappropriate she ever witnessed, that President Trump was always extremely professional and friendly to her.
Back in 2000, Giuffre was the 16-year-old spa attendant of Trump's Mar-a-Lago club, where Maxwell famously recruited her into Epstein's orbit. Indeed, Epstein's email mentions Mar-a-Lago in connection with the victim, as we've seen revealed in the unredacted documents. And according to Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, Virginia never accused Trump of any misconduct and even said in her memoir that when Trump met her, he, quote, "couldn't have been friendlier." Virginia did acknowledge Trump in passing, describing him as polite and kind to her, and she repeatedly said President Trump was not involved in any wrongdoing whatsoever. Tragically, Virginia took her own life in April 2025 at the age of 41, and her memoir, Nobody's Girl, was published after her death, still reiterating that Trump never mistreated her. Now, as we see, the White House has seized on this to downplay Epstein's 2011 email, arguing that Democrats intentionally redacted Virginia's name to create a fake narrative implying Trump's guilt. Caroline Leavitt has said, quote, "These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong."
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong.
So was this 2011 message a red herring? Honestly, I wouldn't say so. Virginia did spend time with Trump. She worked at Mar-a-Lago and indeed never accused Trump publicly, but Epstein's email suggests that there's more to the story. He specifically says that the teen victim spent hours with Trump at Epstein's own house. And as we know, Virginia has not publicly described being at Epstein's Manhattan or Palm Beach homes with Trump, which then raises the possibility that Epstein was referring to another victim or an undisclosed encounter. As we know, House Republicans are going to continue to claim that the unredacted documents show the name Virginia, raising their point that the Democrats are trying to stir suspicion by redacting it. However, even if it was Virginia, her not accusing Trump publicly doesn't mean Trump wasn't a witness to Epstein's abuse behind closed doors, right? I also want to get into a little bit of Epstein's mindset at the time of this email. So he was a registered sex offender in 2011, and he was trying to rehabilitate his image after his 2008 plea deal. And it appears that he was keenly aware that Trump's silence was protecting Trump himself and perhaps even protecting Epstein as well. Epstein calling Trump a dog that hasn't barked implies that he expected Trump might one day speak up, but he hadn't yet, and the tone is almost grateful for Trump's discretion. Epstein wants Maxwell to realize how remarkable it is that Trump never ratted him out. But why might Trump have stayed quiet? Well, perhaps because, as Epstein implies, Trump would incriminate himself by acknowledging time spent with Epstein's girls. Notably, in July 2019, after Epstein's rearrest, Trump told reporters, quote, "I had no idea about Epstein's crimes," and claimed he hadn't spoken to Epstein in many years. But Epstein's emails portrayed Trump as fully aware. Epstein even wrote in an email to himself as sort of a note or memo in February 2019 stating, quote, "Trump knew of the abuse, and he came to my house many times during that period. He never got a massage." In that last line, he never got a massage. In Epstein's world, massage was often a euphemism for sexual contact with underage girls, and Epstein was essentially recording posterity that Trump visited often and knew what was happening, but according to Epstein, Trump never personally engaged in the abuse. In sum, Epstein's account was that Trump was an observer, not a perpetrator, but an observer who knew nonetheless. It's also worth noting that in the thousands of pages from Epstein's prior legal cases or Ghislaine Maxwell's 2021 trial never implicated Trump in any wrongdoing. His name did not appear in victim testimony, and this dog never barked in court. These emails are the first direct evidence from Epstein's own hand suggesting Donald Trump had knowledge of his sexual exploitation of minors. It also raises the uncomfortable question, what exactly did Trump witness? What was the extent of his knowledge? I mean, for us Americans, it's kind of crazy. This is a guy that was elected president. Anyone else, and it would be, I don't know. Never mind. If I told you I was friends with Jeffrey Epstein and I appeared in his emails, would you help me campaign for president?
Look, folks, before we go too far, I've got something to tell you.
Excuse me, but I've got something to tell you first. Thank you for ruining my life.
Ashley!
What did you do?
Everybody's always blaming me for everything.
Now, fast forward to December 2015. Trump is now a frontrunner for the Republican presidential nomination, and reporters are starting to probe his past associations, Epstein included. In an email dated December 15th, 2015, journalist Michael Woof would give Epstein a heads up that CNN planned to ask Trump that very night about his relationship with Epstein. Quote, "I hear CNN planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you, either on air and in a scrum afterwards," Wolf wrote. This was around the time of the GOP primary debate in Las Vegas, aired on CNN, and presumably CNN anchors were ready to press Trump on the Epstein connection, if given the chance. Epstein will respond a few hours later, quote, "If we were able to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be?" In other words, Epstein was contemplating feeding Trump a prefabricated response in order to diffuse the whole issue. Wolf's reply, however, was essentially, "Don't help Trump, let him lie and use it against him," saying, quote, "I think you should let him hang himself. Then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him, or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him. generating a debt. Of course, it is possible that when asked, he'll say Jeffrey is a great guy and has gotten a raw deal and is a victim of political correctness, which is to be outlawed in a Trump regime. This email shows Epstein and Wolf gaming out this whole scenario. Wolf's suggestion has a Machiavellian flair, as by not coordinating an answer with Trump, Epstein would literally let Trump potentially deny their ties, and then Epstein could then publicly contradict him with evidence, thus hanging Trump with his own lie. That currency, as Wolf calls it, could either be used to hurt Trump's campaign, or, if Trump looked likely to win, to extract favors by not exposing him, i.e. Trump would owe Epstein a debt. In short, Epstein had leverage, and Wolf was reminding him to use it shrewdly. It's not clear if CNN ever actually asked Trump. In fact, I don't think they did. No public record shows Trump being questioned on Epstein in the 2015-2016 primary debates. However, the email reveals that Wolf and Epstein were in regular contact during the campaign. In a phone interview this week, Wolf would confirm that he was discussing Trump with Epstein around the time, saying, quote, I was in an in-depth conversation with Epstein at that time about his relationship with Donald Trump. I was pushing Epstein at that point to go public with what he knew about Trump. Wolf told this to ABC News. He added that Epstein, quote, proved to be an enormously valuable source to me on Trump's world. Nevertheless, Wolf would go on to publish 4 best-selling books on Trump, including Fire and Fury in 2018, and he has since hinted that Epstein provided insider info. It appears that Wolf believed that if Epstein spoke out in 2015 or 2016, it could seriously damage Trump's campaign. One newly revealed email from October 2016, just a month before Election Day, would show Wolf trying again. Wolf wrote, quote, there's an opportunity to come forward this week and talk about Trump in such a way that could garner you great sympathy and help finish him. Interested? This was shortly after the infamous Access Hollywood tape, in which Trump bragged about groping women, became public, or, grab them by the pussy.
And I failed. I'll admit it.
Whoa.
I did try and fuck her. She was married.
That's huge news, Sarah.
No, Nancy. No, this was marriages. And I moved on her very heavily. In fact, I took her out furniture shopping. She wanted to get some furniture. I said, I'll show you where they have some nice furniture. I took her out furniture. I moved on her like a bitch. But I couldn't get there. And she was married. Then all of a sudden, I see her. She's now got the big phony tits and everything. She's totally changed her look. I got to use some Tic Tacs just in case I start kissing her. I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the pussy. I can do anything.
Pull the hem.
Hello, how are you?
Wolf was effectively urging to pile on with his Trump dirt right before the election. However, it's unclear if Epstein responded, but we know that Epstein never went public. At the time, Epstein was laying low, having avoided federal prosecution via his 2008 plea deal, and it seemed that jumping into a presidential race would have brought a harsh spotlight on his own misdeeds. Epstein did not entirely ignore Wolf's prodding, as behind the scenes, Epstein's actually appeared to have considered leaking material on Trump. In fact, Epstein was in touch with at least one New York Times reporter during the 2016 campaign, Landon Thomas Jr., a financial journalist who had covered Epstein years earlier. Now we know that Epstein dangled some very tempting tidbits to Landon Thomas, as in one exchange, Epstein suddenly offered, quote, would you like photos of Donald and girls in bikinis in my kitchen? Thomas immediately responded, yes. However, it's unclear if Epstein actually had or sent such photos, but the suggestion is explosive. Epstein implied that he had pictures of Trump with young women at Epstein's home. In another email, Epstein told Thomas that reporters should, quote, ask my housemen about Donald, almost walking through the door, leaving his nose print on the glass as young women were swimming in the pool, and he was so focused, he walked straight into the door. In this seemingly joke of a story, it seems that Trump was so fixated by the girls in Epstein's pool that he literally face-planted into a glass door. These anecdotes, while darkly comedic, continue to reinforce that Trump was a frequent guest at Epstein's properties and noticeably was preoccupied with Epstein's young female staff. Epstein even bragged to the Times reporter about sharing a girlfriend with Trump in the 1990s. He sent Landon Thomas a link to a feature story about a woman and wrote, quote, "My 20-year-old girlfriend in 93. That after 2 years, I gave to Donald." This startling claim suggests that Epstein introduced a 22-year-old woman to Trump around 1995. Trump would have been around 49 then, married to Marla Maples at the time, and we don't know who this woman was, nor whether she actually truly dated Trump after Epstein, but as Epstein was framing it, he, quote, "gave her to Donald," which also speaks volumes about how he viewed women as chattel to be passed among wealthy pals. This is also very important as it underscores the close social bond Epstein and Trump shared in that era, a bond that Trump's team would later minimize and continue to minimize to this day. Notably, Michael Wolff has said Epstein claimed to be, quote, Trump's closest friend for 10 years until their falling out in the early 2000s. None of these tantalizing leads ever made it to print in 2016. The New York Times never ran a big expose on Trump's and Epstein's ties during the campaign, and Landon Thomas, as it turns out, had a friendly relationship with Epstein itself, even accepting a $30,000 donation from Epstein for a charity years earlier, and later resigned from the Times when that came to light. Epstein himself stayed quiet publicly, but the emails show that Epstein was privately compiling and offering up evidence of Trump's behavior, photos of girls in bikinis, witness testimony from his staff, personal anecdotes. It seems that Epstein was effectively curating a blackmail file, whether for journalists or for his own future use. Now, once Trump won the presidency, Epstein's correspondence would show a mix of fascination and alarm. Despite their estrangement, Epstein remained fixated on Trump's fortunes and was still in contact with people in Trump's orbit, as well as Trump's critics. A striking email would come days just after Trump's inauguration on February 8, 2017. Epstein would write to former Harvard president Larry Summers and delivered his verdict on the new president, quote, "Recall, I've told you I've met some very bad people, none as bad as Trump. Not one decent cell in his body. So, yes, dangerous." Now, Summers, who served as Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton, was presumably commiserating with Epstein about Trump's early presidency. This was around the time that Trump's chaotic first weeks included the travel ban and staff turmoil, and Summers had apparently asked Epstein for his thoughts, and Epstein did not mince words. He called Trump the worst person he had ever met, and fundamentally indecent. Now, coming from a convicted pedophile, that's crazy. Epstein and Summers continued corresponding about Trump throughout 2017, 2018, and in one July 2018 exchange, after Trump's controversial Helsinki summit with Putin, Summers asked, quote, "Do the Russians have stuff on Trump? Today was appalling, even by his standards." Epstein replied with his own appraisal of Trump's performance, quote, "My email is full of similar comments. Wow, I'm sure his view is that it went super well. He has no idea of the symbolism. He has no idea of most things." Clearly, Epstein felt Trump was in over his head and oblivious, and these chats show Epstein stayed politically engaged and in contact with center-left elites like Summers, a prominent Democrat. And yes, Epstein was still networking with Trump world figures as well. This includes people like Peter Thiel, the tech billionaire and early Trump backer, who appears in Epstein's calendar. Epstein was slated to, quote, have lunch with Thiel on November 27, 2017, according to his schedule, but it's not confirmed if the lunch actually occurred. But more importantly, Epstein did correspond directly with Peter via email. In November 2018, Epstein emailed him saying, quote, "Are you enjoying LA? I liked your Trump exaggerations. Not lies." Peter replied, "Can't complain thus far." This is a brief, puzzling exchange that suggests Epstein was complimenting Peter's public defense of Trump, perhaps referring to the comments that Peter made that Trump's bombastic statements were exaggerations rather than outright lies, and the friendly tone indicates Epstein had an open line to Peter, who by 2018 had relocated to Los Angeles and remained influential in Trump's circle. It's also worth noting that Peter is a close ally of Trump's current vice president, J.D. Vance, as Peter funded Vance's Senate campaign and reportedly remains an advisor. Yeah, that's a key patron of the VP that was kind of buddy-buddy with Epstein. Maybe you should raise a little bit eyebrows, I don't know. We'd also see Steve Bannon, Trump's former White House strategist, who was also scheduled for a meeting with Epstein. Epstein's planner lists Bannon on February 16th, 2019. This would have been after Bannon left the White House as he departed in 2017, but was also while he was still a prominent figure in Trump's orbit. We don't know if the lunch happened, but its mere scheduling is intriguing nonetheless, as why would Bannon meet with Jeffrey Epstein of all people? Maybe Bannon was seeking dirt on Trump's enemies or on the Clintons or vice versa. Maybe Epstein was probing Trump's camp. It's weird the connections Epstein had. He could chat with Larry Summers one day and then plan lunch with Steve Bannon on the next. We'd even see Elon Musk's name pop up. In a separate batch of records released in September 2025, House Democrats revealed an Epstein schedule reminder noting, quote, Elon Musk to island on December 6, 2014. Is this still happening? Now, Epstein owned a private Caribbean island, Little St. James, infamous for his illicit activities, and the note suggests that Musk had planned the visit in 2014. However, there's no evidence that he actually went, and Musk has since denied ever being on Epstein's island, and no travel records show that he did. Still, the fact that Epstein's files mention one of tech's biggest names shows the sheer scale of his network. Epstein cultivated the rich and powerful across many sectors: tech, finance, academia, politics, all weaving a spider web that included Trump's friends, allies, and also his opponents. On March 21st, 2018, we'd see Mark Epstein, the brother of Jeffrey Epstein, sending his email suggesting that he asked the former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon, quote, if Putin has the photos of Trump blowing Bubba. Now, this has become a big thing. To put it plainly, it's suggesting that Donald Trump gave Bill Clinton a blowjob, and I don't know. If we had more to go on than this, it's hard to read these emails out of context too, because it seems kind of like a joke, but also, would you be surprised? I also think it's funny that people are burning their MAGA hats after this one specific email was revealed, because God forbid Trump be bisexual. That's where the line is drawn. We'd also see one more revealing contact. Catherine Rumler, President Barack Obama's former White House counsel. Emails show that Catherine, by then a private attorney, kept in touch with Epstein. On August 24th, 2018, Catherine emailed Epstein a New York Times op-ed calling for Trump's impeachment after Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, pleaded guilty to campaign finance crimes. Epstein replied to Catherine with an almost gloating tone about Trump's peril. Quote, you see, I know how dirty Donald is. My guess is that non-lawyers, NY biz, have no idea what it means to have your fixer flip. Here, Epstein is essentially saying, I knew how corrupt Trump is, and the average businessman can't fathom it. But we lawyers know that when a fixer like Cohen flips, it's extremely bad news. And indeed, Cohen's flipping ultimately led Trump to being indicted years later in 2023 for these hush money payments. And in that same summer, 2018, House Democrats say that Epstein was actually planning to meet Catherine in person in May 2019, just before Epstein's final arrest. And notably, Michael Wolff had also sought Epstein's help getting in touch with Trump insiders. In one email, Wolff asked Epstein to introduce him to Tom Barrack, Trump's inaugural committee chair, and to Catherine Rumler herself, because Wolff needed, quote, off-the-record perspective for a book on Trump's White House. Epstein was clearly a connector, even among people in Trump's orbit and his adversaries, which I keep saying, but it's kind of crazy. All these interactions paint a picture of Epstein in 2017 and 2018 as someone carefully monitoring Trump's presidency and criticizing him privately, even positioning himself as a potential Trump spoiler if needed. He told Summers Trump was, quote, dangerous. He told Catherine, quote, dirty Donald was in big legal trouble, and even told his own lawyer, Reed Weingarten, in December 2018, that Democrats shouldn't treat Trump like a normal villain because Trump, as president, had, quote, great dangerous power and might lash out if cornered. Tightening the noose too slowly risks a very bad situation. Gambino was never the commander-in-chief. Not so with this maniac. Epstein warned, comparing Trump to a mafia don with far greater capacity for destruction. It's macabre and strange. Epstein advising how to take Trump down without triggering mayhem, but also highlights that Epstein saw Trump as uniquely menacing. It's weird seeing one piece of shit call someone else an even bigger piece of shit. It's very interesting. Now, by January 2019, Epstein likely sensed storm clouds gathering. In late 2018, the Miami Herald's expose on his plea deal reignited public outrage, and federal investigators, spurred by that reporting, were quietly preparing a new sex trafficking case. Epstein, however, was still free at the time and corresponding avidly, as we'd see. One of the newly released emails is dated January 31st, 2019, just 5 months before Epstein's arrest. Epstein wrote to Michael Woof, apparently responding to Wolf's inquiry about Trump distancing himself from Epstein. Epstein would reply in this fragmented manner, but he would state victim name redacted, Mar-a-Lago. Trump said he asked me to resign, never a member ever. Of course, he knew that about the girls, and he asked Ghislaine to stop. So let's unpack this. Epstein is referring to Trump's claim that he had banned or kicked out Epstein from Mar-a-Lago years prior. Now, there are indeed reports that Trump expelled Epstein from the club around 2007, allegedly after Epstein hit on or assaulted an underage daughter of another member. Trump himself told reporters in July of 2019 that he banned Epstein and had a falling out a long time ago, for unspecified reasons.
I was not a fan of Jeffrey Epstein, and you watched people yesterday saying that I threw him out of a club. I didn't want anything to do with him. That was many, many years ago. It shows you one thing, that I have good taste, okay? Now, other people, they went all over with him. They went to his island. They went all over the place. He was very well known in Palm Beach. His island, whatever his island was, wherever it is, I was never there.
Later, Trump's allies in his administration would insist that he barred Epstein because, quote, Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile and he was a creep, specifically mentioning Epstein attempting to lure spa attendants away from Mar-a-Lago. However, in this 2019 email, Epstein is scoffing at Trump's narrative. Epstein claims that he was never an official member in the first place. Now, this is plausible, as Epstein, a Palm Beach socialite, may have just been a frequent guest at Mar-a-Lago and not a dues-paying member, and the crucial part is the next line. Of course, he knew about the girls, as he asked Ghislaine to stop. Epstein is directly asserting that Trump was aware of Epstein and Maxwell's trafficking activities. Specifically, Trump asked Ghislaine to stop. Well, stop what exactly? You could say the implication is stop bringing underage girls around Mar-a-Lago. Now, recall this. Ghislaine Maxwell's role was to procure and groom young women for Epstein under the guise of hiring them as masseuses. The Mar-a-Lago connection is key here, as Virginia Guffrey was recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell at Mar-a-Lago's spa in 2000. And it's long been rumored that word of this got back to Trump. Epstein's email essentially confirms a rumor. Trump personally intervened and told Ghislaine Maxwell to knock it off on his turf. This not only indicates that Trump knew what Maxwell was doing, seeking out teenage girls for Epstein, but also that Trump was concerned enough to ban them, likely to protect his club or avoid liability. In short, Epstein says Trump knew about the underage girls and asked Maxwell to stop bringing them around. This is perhaps the most directly incriminating statement about Trump in all the emails, as it flatly contradicts Trump's repeated refrain, quote, saying, I had no idea what Epstein was doing. If Trump did tell Maxwell to knock it off 2 decades ago, then he absolutely had an idea. And the White House has also tried to spin this as a positive, saying, see, Trump heroically threw Epstein out of his club. But this spin is self-defeating, as it confirms Trump witnessed an appropriate behavior. In fact, Trump officials have proudly recounted this story. Caroline Leavitt said, quote, President Trump kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of his club decades ago for being a creep to his female employees.
Jeffrey Epstein was a member at Mar-a-Lago until President Trump kicked him out because Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile and he was a creep.
And in summer 2025, Trump himself, now back in the White House, publicly said he expelled Epstein because Epstein, quote, stole a young woman from the Mar-a-Lago spa. It's a very weird interview. He seems to cut himself off here, or realizes that he said a little bit too much, but it's interesting.
Everyone knows the people that were taken, and it was the concept of taking people that work for me is bad, but that story's been pretty well out there. And the answer is yes, they were.
Yes, they were. Yes,
yeah.
What did they do?
In the spa.
What kind of jobs? In the spa.
Yeah, it's people that work in the spa. I have a great spa, one of the best spas in the world at Mar-a-Lago. And people were taken out of the spa, hired by him. In other words, gone. And other people would come and complain, this guy is taking people from the spa. I didn't know that. And then when I heard about it, I told him, I said, listen, we don't want you taking our people, whether it was spa or not spa. I don't want him taking people. And he was fine, and then not too long after that, he did it again, and I said, out of here.
Mr. President, did one of those stolen, persons, that include Virginia Jeffrey?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people, yeah. He stole her. And by the way, she had no complaints about us, as you know.
This is all tantamount to Trump acknowledging that he knew Epstein was sexually exploiting underage girls in the early 2000s, even as he insists that he personally did nothing wrong. So by early 2019, we have Epstein privately reaffirming Trump definitely knew. Epstein also showed a keen awareness and annoyance of Trump's public distancing from him. Michael Wolff had confirmed that he was talking to Epstein around this time for a book, so Wolff likely got a earful of Epstein's perspective on Trump. Just one day after this email, on February 1st, 2019, Epstein penned an email to himself, essentially a digital diary entry which the Washington Post obtained, and in it, Epstein wrote, "Trump knew of it and came to my house many times during that period. He never got a massage," as we discussed earlier. This is all as if Epstein was preparing a factual rebuttal to Trump's expected denials. He knew authorities were circling him by this time, and maybe he thought these notes would one day serve as leverage or evidence. However, sure enough, Epstein's downfall would come soon after, as in July 2019, the FBI arrested Epstein for sex trafficking minors. The day after the arrest, President Trump famously said, "I am not a fan of his, I can tell you." And he recounted that they hadn't spoke in 15 years after falling out.
I had a falling out with him a long time ago. I don't think I've spoken to him for 15 years. I wasn't a fan. I was not, a long time ago. I'd say maybe 15 years. I was not a fan of his. That I can tell you. I was not a fan of his.
He did not mention banning Epstein for being a creep, as this detail only emerged from other sources later, and instead Trump insinuated that the breakup was over a real estate feud, as indeed in 2004 the two men competed to buy the same Palm Beach mansion, and Trump ultimately outbid Epstein. Epstein's emails confirm that this was one source of conflict, as he wrote in 2019 that Trump outbid him on the property, which ultimately led to their estrangement. But notably, Epstein's animosity towards Trump by 2019 went far beyond this real estate entanglement. Perhaps the most jaw-dropping line comes from a December 2018 text exchange, just after news broke that the Justice Department was shelving plans to release more Epstein files. An unidentified friend texted Epstein, quote, "It will all blow over. They're just trying to take down Trump and doing whatever they can to do that." And Epstein will respond, "Yes, thanks. It's wild, because I am the one able to take him down." Read that again. Jeffrey Epstein believed he alone had the power to bring down Donald Trump. Now, this is something, and given what we now learned, perhaps it's not an empty threat. Perhaps Epstein possessed knowledge, possibly photos. However, he most definitely had firsthand experiences linking Trump to underage girls and sexual misbehavior, even if Trump didn't partake, allegedly. Epstein clearly felt he had ultimate leverage over the President of the United States, and he told his friend he could use it if he wanted. Of course, Epstein never got the chance, as in August of 2019, he was found dead in his jail cell, and his death was ruled a suicide. Whatever secrets he kept died with him. The picture painted by all these emails is starkly at odds with Trump's public assertions. Trump says he barely knew Epstein and they fell out in the mid-2000s, and Trump had no idea Epstein was molesting underage girls. However, Epstein's emails say Trump was one of Epstein's closest pals and spent hours at Epstein's homes and knew about the girls and even personally intervened to stop Maxwell from recruiting on one occasion. Epstein even considered Trump the dog that didn't bark, a friend who stayed conveniently silent. It's very telling that none other than Alan Dershowitz, the attorney who was both Epstein's lawyer and one of Trump's impeachment defenders, would show up as a bridge between Epstein and Trump in these documents. Dershowitz wasn't just Epstein's most aggressive public defender, he was also a vocal ally of Donald Trump. He moved in the same social circles, vacationed at the Palm Beach estates, and became one of the few high-profile figures who publicly defended both men at crucial moments. He represented Epstein during the 2006 investigation, then stood on the Senate floor in 2020 arguing Trump committed no impeachable offense. Dershowitz categorically denied all misconduct allegations to Epstein, but his dual role, being Epstein's lawyer in the 2000s and Trump's legal shield in the 2010s, makes him an interesting figure, to say the least. And indeed, Dershowitz even pops up in Epstein's famous birthday book. In this 2003 scrapbook that was recently released by Congress, a letter attributed to Dershowitz jokingly claimed that he convinced Vanity Fair to write about Epstein's success. In the actual note, Dershowitz says he got an early copy of the Vanity Unfair article and, quote, talked them into changing the focus from you to Bill Clinton as a birthday gift to Epstein. Of course, Dershowitz has since claimed that he doesn't recall writing the entry, but there it is in Epstein's archive. Yeah, I don't know. The truth may lie in the troves of evidence that are still being digested. Republicans controlling the Oversight Committee insist that they want everything public. Even recently, Trump was like, no, yeah, release the Epstein files, but I don't it's a thing. The release of these emails, of course, set off political firestorms in Washington. The White House immediately, of course, downplayed the revelations. However, what we do know now, thanks to these emails, is much more about Epstein's view of Trump. Epstein saw Trump as a one-time friend who owed him for past discretion. Epstein felt betrayed when Trump tried to rewrite history and distance himself. And Epstein clearly believed that he held up to his unspoken bargain, the dog that hadn't barked. In return, perhaps Epstein expected protection, or at least loyalty, from his former friend. Instead, Trump claimed to have cast Epstein out. And we'd see Epstein's bitterness evident in the emails, saying Trump doesn't have one decent cell in his body, or he's the worst person he's met, a maniac with dangerous power. These emails are filled with references suggesting Epstein had evidence, be it photos, anecdotes from staff, or simply his detailed recollections. I mean, we could only speculate. Epstein died before he could ever leverage whatever he had, if he even had anything. However, this is far from over. There's one part of Epstein's world that says more than his emails ever could: his memory book. Like I said, in 2003, for Epstein's 50th birthday, Ghislaine Maxwell compiled a 238-page scrapbook titled The First 50 Years, filled with contributions from Epstein's friends, acquaintances, and even employees. House Democrats released scanned pages of this album in September 2025, and you could see all this in the description below. And on the surface, it looks like a high society form of yearbook. It's very flattering, and there are a lot of celebratory letters from powerful figures, photographs of Epstein arm in arm with celebrities and world leaders, and inside jokes about his lifestyle. But woven into these pages are deeply disturbing images and sexual innuendo. It makes it sort of jarring now that we know about Epstein's double life. Much of the album is very subjective. There are photos of Epstein embracing women in bikinis, and their faces have been redacted, and even photos showing wild animals having sex. Yes, actual scenes of animals mating, included apparently for humor, as one contributor took a trip to Africa and they attached all their snapshots of wildlife. However, all the pictures they took just happened to have all the animals' genitals on full display, which is, I don't know, interesting. And there are also hand-drawn illustrations that are shockingly on the nose, very disturbing, to say the least. Yeah. Over 150 people are actually named in this book, from well-known public figures to academics and socialites. Donald Trump wrote an artsy note to him for his little birthday as a naked female torso with Donald Trump's signature at the bottom. Next to it, a interesting message saying, "We have certain things in common, Jeffrey. I wish that every day could be another wonderful secret. Enigmas never age. Have you noticed that?" It's interesting. Of course, Trump has denied writing this note and drawing the sketch, but I wouldn't really put it past him. And yeah, many other notes reference Epstein's sexual tastes with a knowing wink. I encourage you to read through this with discretion. It's very disturbing. And yeah, it's very strange. But yeah, that's all we're going to be talking about today. I don't know. Again, sources are all in the description if you just want to read through them personally yourself on your own time. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching. I hope you're doing well. And yeah, man, I love you, bro.